Hey there, Geometry. Again, it's Mr. Lamb, and this is Unit 2, or Learning Target Number 2, from Unit 5, Coordinate Geometry, and this is all about midpoint. And we've talked a little bit about a midpoint throughout the year, and earlier in the year we talked about a midpoint is defined as the point in the middle of a line segment. So that means we do have to have a line segment. We have to have two endpoints. And in order to find the midpoint, it's actually a super easy process. My first point will have the coordinates x1 and y1. My second point will have the coordinates x2 and y2. And to find the midpoint, I just take my two x values, add them together, and then divide by 2. It's essentially just finding the average of those two x's. And then to find the y coordinate of the midpoint, I do the same thing with my y's. I add my two y's together and I divide by 2. One of the things that I do want to make sure we are aware of is this is a point. It is a point on a coordinate plane, which means it is separated by a comma, and there is an x portion and there is a y portion. All right. So make sure that you are writing it as a coordinate point, wrapped in parentheses, separated by a comma. Well, let's take a look. For each set of coordinates, find the coordinates of the midpoint of the segment. So I will always call my midpoint M. So my midpoint, it looks like this first one says for each set. I only see 1 point there. So let's go ahead and throw another point in. Let's use the origin, since there's nothing there. Choose the origin as the point 0, 0. So let's do x's. So my x's are -5 plus the x for the second point is 0 divided by 2. And for my y's, it is 7 plus 0 divided by 2. Okay, well, -5 plus 0 is -5 divided by 2 is -2.5. And 7 plus 0 is 7 divided by 2 is positive 3.5. So that midpoint would be at -2.5 and positive 3.5. For example B, find my midpoint. Take my x's, -8 plus 5, divide by 2. And my y's are 12 plus 4, divide by 2. All right, so this midpoint, -8 plus 5 is -3. Divided by 2 is -3/2. It's also -1.5. I don't care, really, whether it is a decimal answer or a fraction answer. Right? That does not bother me at all. Make sure that you're being consistent. Though I would never report one as a decimal and the other one as a fraction. But if you want to leave it as a fraction, go ahead. If you want to leave it as a decimal, go ahead. That's kind of up to you. For my y's, though, 12 plus 4 is 16, divided by 2 is 8. So that number comes out nice and neat. So the midpoint between those 2 points are -3/2 or -1.5 and positive 8. And now problems 2, 3, 4, and 5. This is more of what you're actually going to see. You're going to see a lot of questions like this, where you just have some points up on a graph, and you have to find the midpoint between them. So first two that I have to deal with, we're going to find the midpoint of segment AB. So let me highlight segment AB. And the midpoint. It is the x values. So what is the x value of this first one? I'm going to kind of write them in. All right. So my x value here is -5. My x value for B is at positive 1. So this is -5 plus 1 divided by 2. My y values. Up here at 6 and up here at 8. So 6 plus 8 divided by 2. All right, so what is that? -5 plus 1 is -4, divided by 2 is -2. 6 plus 8 is 14, divided by 2 is 7. So the midpoint of AB is negative 2, positive 7. And the midpoint of BC. So there's BC. Let's start with my x's. This x value is at 1. This x value is at 8. So my midpoint, 1 plus 8 divided by 2. My y values. This one is negative 9. This one is positive 8. Negative 9 plus 8 divided by 2. 1 plus 8 is 9. Divided by 2 is just that. It's 9 over 2, or 4.5. Negative 9 plus 8 is negative 1. Over 2 is negative 1/2, or negative 0.5. Again, I'm just looking at my x coordinates and my y coordinates. Now, some people like to re-list out the points. That's fine. Right? C is over here at the point 8, negative 9. The only thing I fear about this is if you make a mistake and call that point negative 9, 8, then it's going to throw you off on your midpoint. So be careful. If you are a point, if you like to list your points out, just be careful. Okay, CD is my next one. Here is CD. If I look at my x's first, my x values are at negative 10 and positive 8. So my midpoint is negative 10 plus 8 divided by 2. My y values. See, D is at negative 6. And C is at negative 9. So negative 6 plus negative 9 over 2. Okay, well, negative 10 plus 8 is negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. Negative 6 plus negative 9 is negative 15. Divided by 2 is negative 7.5. If you want to try one, this is a great time to pause the video and go ahead and try DA on your own. So if you would like that, go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, and here is DA. Our x values for D, it's at negative 10. For A, it's at negative 5. So my midpoint is negative 10 plus negative 5 divided by 2. My y values, way up here at 6, and down here at negative 6. So 6 plus negative 6 over 2. Well, negative 10 plus negative 5 is negative 15 over 2, which is negative 7.5. And 6 plus 6 is 0, divided by 2 is 0. So that midpoint would be at negative 15, 0. And that's all it takes to find a midpoint. Add them up and divide by 2. Hope this helps. See you guys soon.